The victim is not punished with rage, but with invisibility. Meanwhile, the narcissist has reinvested. Anti-cathexis is complete. A new object has entered the frame, a fresh projection, a new performance. The survivor is not just discarded, they are unwritten. The false self-actualization point, colonization, and CIPR, collapse-induced psychotic regression. At this phase, the survivor has moved beyond confusion, rage, and despair. They are no longer fighting to be seen, they are vanishing, but not passively. They are actively constructing a new self to withstand the unbearable truth. They were never loved, not as a person, only as an object. This is the false self actualization point. The narcissist, meanwhile, has already reinvested anticathexis into a new object, feeding on the elation of a fresh idealization cycle. They appear resurrected, composed, confident, recharged. The survivor, by contrast, is entering collapsed induced psychotic regression, CIPR, a symbolic and affective implosion, not marked by insanity, but by inversion. The survivor becomes the inverted mirror of the narcissist, not behaviorally, but structurally. This is the paradox. To survive collapse, the survivor becomes its custodian. But what exactly has collapsed? It's not just the romantic illusion or the relationship narrative. It is the internal architecture of the survival self. At the false self actualization point, the survivor undergoes a collapse of both libidinal and anti libidinal structures, the very psychic scaffolding that once kept them afloat. These structures, originally split in order to survive narcissistic attachment, now turn inward on each other. The libidinal self, the longing child, the seeking self, the one who dared to love, is crushed by betrayal when the anti-libidinal self, the protector, the enforcer, the internalized narcissist, collapse under its own unyielding gaze. There is now no self left to defend, only simulation remains. What rises in its place is not a new self, but an internal hall of mirrors, recursive, self-regulating, and devoid of authentic affect. The survivor is no longer navigating reality. They are navigating the internalized machinery of the narcissist worldview projected onto their own psyche. This is not disassociation, it is symbolic possession. At this phase, the survivor becomes symbolic parent and symbolic child to themselves, locked in a recursive self-regulation, shame deflection, and trauma looping. Their behaviors may appear functional, but the internal world has frozen into a loop of unmetabolized meaning. They may even speak like the narcissist. The voice, the tone, the cold detachment, all has been absorbed. But this is not becoming the abuser. This is what it costs to survive them. The reassignment of the persecutory object, smear campaigns, and narcissistic redemption. The final stage in the shared fantasy cycle is not simply discard, it is narrative transference. As Sam Vaknin explains, the narcissist, once fully decathected, experiences the discarded partner not as a memory, but as a threat. Their continued existence threatens the coherence of the narcissist's newly formed fantasy with a new supply. The solution is a symbolic transference. The survivor is recast as the persecutory object. This is not slander for its own sake, it is self-redemption by projection. Vaktin notes smear campaigns are not revenge, they are narrative surgeries. The narcissist cannot tolerate the idea that someone who saw behind the mask still walks the earth. The survivor is now the villain, the abuser, the unstable one, the monster. This process is critical for the narcissist's internal homeostasis. By installing the persecutory object into the survivor, the narcissist purges internal shame and re-establishes a stabilized false self in the eyes of the new supply. In input terms, this is the final inversion. The survivor, already fragmented by the collapse, now faces external confirmation of internal distortions. Friends fade, family sides with the narcissist, institutions may be weaponized. The survivor's attempts to explain are seen as bitterness or madness. This is not just social damage, it is psychic collapse. Input identifies this moment of full interject co-option. The persecutory object has been fully installed. The survivor is no longer fighting for love or closure. They are now fighting for authorship, for the right to say who they were and what happened. But the false self has already won the first round. The final cruelty of narcissistic abuse is this: you are not only discarded, but rewritten, and you must heal inside the lie. At this point, the narcissistic collapse cycle, the survivor is no longer simply discarded, they internally rewritten. The process of interject co-option is the narcissist's final act of symbolic control, in the survivor's own internal world becomes colonized by the narcissist's discarded projection. Sam Vaknin speaks often about the internalization of the abuser. This is not merely about hearing their voice in one's head, it is about the replacement of the survivor's symbolic coordinates with those of the narcissist. The victim no longer knows what they feel unless it is filtered through the narcissist's imagined gaze. This is where the persecutory object becomes active. No longer outside, the object now lives within, whispering self-hatred, guilt, shame, and unworthiness. The survivor believes these feelings are their own, but they are inherited residues of the narcissist's fragmented self. In input, this is the stage of full symbolic colonization. The survivor's internal system of meaning collapses. The interjects are now in control, enacting loops of self-regulation that mimic the original abuse. The redeemer ego becomes mute. The true self goes into hiding. The false self-protector now governs all perception and behavior. Crucially, this state often persists long after the relationship has ended. Even in no contact, even in recovery, the survivor may find themselves policing their emotions, suppressing their needs, doubting their memories, all in service of an internalized other who no longer exists. This is not codependence. This is post-traumatic symbolic inversion. The smear campaign by the narcissist serves to reinforce this state. By presenting a false narrative externally, the narcissist weaponizes social mirrors against the survivor. Family, friends, and institutions may reflect back an image of the survivor that matches the internal persecutory interject, completing the symbolic trap. The narcissist need the survivor to become the persecutory object. Only then can they split the experience and avoid internal shame. The pain, humiliation, and exposure of the fantasy field is displaced into the survivor's image. Thus begins the campaign. They were unstable, they were emotionally abusive, they wouldn't let go. These are not statements, they are symbolic reassurances to the narcissist's ego. It's not my failure, it was theirs. And so the survivor is not only erased, they are rewritten as enemy. Even friends and family are turned. This is not merely triangulation, it is the full activation of introject reversal. The survivor now holds both bad objects and the persecutory gaze. They are alone, rejected, confused, and symbolically annihilated. In input, this moment marks the deepest point of collapse. At this point, the survivor may feel if they are going mad, but they are not. They are experiencing full psychotic consequence of mirrored psychic inversion, or MPI. Their reality has been overwritten. Recovery from this state is possible, but it begins with recognition, not of the narcissist pathology, but of the survivor's own internal hijack. The voices of shame is not theirs. The looping guilt is not theirs. The story they are telling themselves is not theirs. It was all planted. It was all rehearsed. It was all co-opted.